One careless word can reveal more about the speaker than the person being judged. The sentence would not be spoken until much later that evening, but its meaning quietly settled into one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants long before anyone recognized it. Warm light poured from crystal chandeliers onto polished marble floors, while a grand piano filled the elegant dining room with soft melodies that blended naturally with conversations among executives, diplomats, investors, and entrepreneurs. Every table reflected wealth, discipline, and quiet influence. Near the center of the restaurant sat Ethan Miller, a 46-year-old executive leading the American division of one of Japan's largest technology corporations. His reputation had been built upon precision, efficiency, and uncompromising standards. Board members admired his strategic thinking. Competitors respected his discipline. Employees rarely questioned his decisions. Across from him sat several senior executives discussing an ambitious international expansion that could redefine the company's future throughout North America and Asia. Every document spread across the linen-covered table represented months of preparation and years of opportunity. As the discussion intensified, Olivia Brooks approached carrying a polished silver tray. At 29 years old, the black waitress had become one of the restaurant's most respected employees because of her remarkable professionalism, exceptional memory, and calm confidence under pressure. Dressed in a perfectly pressed black uniform with a neatly tied apron, she greeted the executives with a warm smile before carefully placing sparkling water beside each guest. Her movements were smooth, respectful, and unhurried. She checked every glass, adjusted each place setting with quiet precision, and politely asked whether anyone needed additional refreshments before the first course arrived. While serving the final guest, one porcelain spoon resting beside a coffee cup shifted slightly against the saucer, creating a faint sound that briefly interrupted the conversation. The tiny mistake lasted no more than a second, yet Ethan looked up immediately. His expression hardened with visible disappointment. Without lowering his voice, he said, "That was careless. Honestly, that was dumb." The word echoed farther than he intended. Nearby conversations softened. Several guests glanced toward the table before quickly looking away again. Olivia remained completely composed. She neither defended herself nor reacted emotionally. She simply adjusted the spoon back into place and answered with quiet professionalism. "I apologize for the interruption, sir. Thank you for letting me correct it." Ethan offered only a brief nod before turning back toward the executives. "Attention to detail separates excellence from mediocrity," he continued. "Small mistakes often reveal larger limitations." Olivia acknowledged the comment with the same calm expression before wishing everyone an enjoyable evening and walking toward another table. Not once did she allow disappointment to appear across her face. She greeted a family celebrating an anniversary with genuine warmth, recommended a seasonal entree to another couple, and patiently answered questions from first-time visitors who seemed overwhelmed by the elegant surroundings. Every guest received exactly the same kindness. Watching from across the table, one Japanese executive quietly studied Olivia before turning back toward Ethan. He said nothing, but something about her composure caught his attention. Most people would have shown embarrassment after such a public remark. Instead, she carried herself with quiet dignity, as though her confidence depended on something far deeper than another person's opinion. Ethan remained focused on the presentation displayed across his tablet. He spoke confidently about global expansion, operational efficiency, and leadership philosophy. "Successful organizations survive because they recognize ability quickly," he explained. "Experience teaches you to identify intelligence within minutes." Several executives nodded in agreement while taking notes. Olivia passed nearby carrying another polished tray, effortlessly anticipating requests from surrounding tables without interrupting the ongoing discussion. She heard every sentence, but her expression never changed. Years of serving guests from every imaginable background had taught her that people often revealed their character during ordinary moments rather than extraordinary ones. She quietly thanked a coworker for assisting another table, smiled warmly at an elderly couple celebrating 50 years of marriage, and continued her work with steady confidence. Across the dining room, Ethan never looked in her direction again. In his mind, the evening's brief interruption had already been forgotten. He believed he had correctly judged the waitress within a single moment. What he could not possibly know was that the quiet woman moving gracefully beneath the crystal chandeliers possessed a mind shaped by years of disciplined study, thoughtful observation, and a question so insightful that before the night was over it would bring an entire room of accomplished executives into complete silence. Olivia Brooks continued moving through the elegant restaurant with the same quiet confidence that had defined her entire evening. The warm glow of crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors, while the soft melody of the grand piano blended effortlessly with conversations among international executives, investors, and distinguished guests. To everyone watching, she appeared to be exactly what Ethan Miller had assumed only moments earlier, a professional waitress dedicated to delivering flawless service with patience and grace. Yet beneath that calm exterior lived a disciplined mind shaped by years of study, relentless curiosity, and a habit of asking questions that reached deeper than easy answers. She approached another table where a family from Chicago was celebrating a college graduation, recommended several signature dishes, answered every question with thoughtful confidence, and wished them a memorable evening before quietly returning toward the executive dining area. Not once did she allow Ethan's careless remark to influence the warmth she showed anyone else. She believed that another person's words did not have to determine her own character. Back at the executive table, Ethan resumed leading the strategic discussion as though nothing unusual had happened. Digital reports covered the large tablet resting beside his dinner plate, while charts illustrating projected international growth appeared across several printed briefing documents. The executives surrounding him listened carefully as he outlined ambitious plans for expanding operations into new markets throughout Asia and North America. His voice remained calm, organized, and authoritative. Successful leadership, he explained, depends on recognizing talent quickly and eliminating uncertainty before it becomes expensive. Experience teaches you to evaluate people almost immediately. Several executives nodded in agreement while recording notes. One senior manager commented that first impressions often determined hiring decisions inside highly competitive organizations. Ethan responded without hesitation. They usually do because competence leaves clues. So does the absence of it. His words sounded perfectly logical to many people at the table, yet one Japanese executive quietly remained silent. He had noticed the remarkable composure Olivia displayed after being publicly criticized. Instead of responding emotionally, she had continued serving every guest with exactly the same professionalism. That level of discipline suggested something deeper than ordinary customer service, although he could not yet explain why. Olivia returned carrying freshly prepared appetizers arranged with remarkable precision upon a polished silver tray. Every plate reached the correct guest without hesitation. Every garnish remained perfectly positioned. Every movement reflected years of experience and extraordinary attention to detail. Ethan barely acknowledged her presence before continuing his presentation. Technical knowledge matters, he said, but judgment matters even more. The ability to recognize intelligence separates exceptional leaders from average managers. Olivia quietly placed the final appetizer before the last executive and politely asked whether anyone required additional refreshments. Her voice remained warm and respectful. After receiving several requests for sparkling water and coffee refills, she smiled gently and assured everyone she would return immediately. As she walked toward the service station, she passed two younger servers discussing graduate school applications during a brief pause between orders. Olivia encouraged them both with sincere enthusiasm, reminding them that education was an investment no one could ever take away. Neither coworker knew she had once completed advanced business courses herself, or that she still spent countless evenings reading books on economics, organizational leadership, and decision science simply because she genuinely enjoyed learning. Knowledge, to Olivia, had never been a performance. It was a lifelong conversation with the world around her. Moments later, she returned carrying fresh coffee for the executive table. Ethan continued outlining an increasingly complex global expansion strategy, confidently explaining how disciplined organizations prevented failure by asking the right questions before committing billions of dollars. Olivia quietly refilled each porcelain cup without interrupting a single sentence. As she listened, one subtle assumption inside Ethan's presentation caught her attention. It was not a minor detail. It was a foundational weakness hidden beneath an otherwise impressive strategy. She finished pouring the final cup, thanked the executives politely, and stepped away without revealing the thoughtful expression that briefly crossed her face. For the first time that evening, she realized that before the night ended, one carefully chosen question might matter far more than every confident answer already spoken around that table. The conversation around Ethan Miller's table grew increasingly ambitious as the evening progressed. Crystal chandeliers bathed the elegant dining room in warm golden light, while the quiet notes of the grand piano blended with the measured voices of executives discussing international expansion, innovation, and long-term strategy. Expensive leather portfolios lay open beside polished dinner plates, and detailed financial projections rested neatly across the white linen tablecloth. Ethan spoke with the calm certainty of a leader who had built his career on disciplined analysis and decisive judgment. Every executive around the table listened carefully, occasionally nodding as he explained how successful organizations separated themselves from competitors by identifying weaknesses before anyone else could see them. A strong strategy survives difficult questions, he said confidently. A weak strategy survives only because no one has challenged it yet. Several executives expressed their agreement. One vice president praised Ethan's ability to simplify complicated business problems into practical decisions. Another remarked that few leaders possessed such consistent clarity under pressure. Ethan accepted the compliments with polite confidence before returning to the presentation displayed across his tablet. Nearby, Olivia Brooks continued serving guests with the same graceful professionalism she had shown since the beginning of her shift. Wearing her perfectly pressed black uniform and neatly tied apron, she carried fresh coffee to another table, helped an elderly guest adjust a chair more comfortably, and quietly reassured a young couple celebrating their engagement that the kitchen would gladly accommodate a special request. Every action reflected patience rather than routine. Every smile appeared sincere rather than practiced. She moved through the restaurant with calm purpose, never drawing attention to herself even though many guests had already noticed the remarkable composure she displayed after Ethan's earlier remark. As she returned toward the executive table carrying a fresh pot of coffee, Ethan continued explaining the company's expansion model. The greatest mistake organizations make, he said, is assuming success in one market automatically predicts success somewhere else. Every decision must be tested from multiple perspectives before implementation. Olivia quietly refilled each porcelain cup without interrupting the discussion. While standing beside the table, she listened carefully to the conversation unfolding around her. Years of studying organizational leadership, economics, behavioral psychology, and business history had taught her to recognize patterns hidden beneath confident presentations. One assumption inside Ethan's proposal quietly stood apart from everything else. It was subtle enough that nobody around the table questioned it, yet significant enough that if left unexamined it could influence every decision that followed. Olivia finished pouring the final cup before stepping back respectfully. Ethan thanked her with a brief nod before continuing. Confidence must always be supported by evidence, he explained. Otherwise it becomes expensive. Several executives smiled approvingly. One of them commented that very few people possess the discipline required to challenge their own thinking. Ethan answered immediately. That is exactly why leadership belongs to those prepared to ask difficult questions. Olivia heard the sentence clearly while placing the coffee pot back onto her polished silver tray. For the briefest moment, she paused. Not because she wished to interrupt the meeting, but because she recognized an unexpected contradiction between Ethan's words and the strategy he had just defended. She quietly returned to the service station without saying anything. Another server noticed the thoughtful expression crossing her face. "Everything all right?" he asked softly. Olivia smiled warmly while arranging clean dessert plates. "Yes, I was simply thinking." "About what?" She gently folded a fresh linen napkin before answering. Sometimes the strongest ideas become even stronger after one honest question. The younger server laughed politely. "You always have an interesting way of looking at things." Olivia smiled, but offered no further explanation. Across the dining room, Ethan concluded another section of his presentation to quiet approval from every executive seated around the table. He believed the meeting had unfolded exactly as planned. Yet unknown to everyone at that table, the quiet waitress he had dismissed earlier had already identified the one question capable of testing the very principle he had spent the entire evening defending, and before the night was over, that single question would leave an accomplished room of leaders searching for an answer no one expected to need. The first dinner course had long been cleared away, yet the discussion at Ethan Miller's table continued with unwavering intensity. Beneath the warm glow of crystal chandeliers, senior executives leaned forward as charts, financial forecasts, and expansion models filled the space between carefully arranged coffee cups and neatly organized briefing folders. Every recommendation seemed polished. Every projection appeared convincing. Ethan spoke with the measured confidence that had earned him international respect throughout his career. "Growth is never accidental," he explained. "It belongs to organizations disciplined enough to challenge every assumption before making a decision." Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. One executive praised the framework as both practical and visionary. Another remarked that the strategy eliminated unnecessary uncertainty by testing every variable before committing resources. Ethan accepted their observations with quiet satisfaction. Nearby, Olivia Brooks approached carrying a polished silver tray holding fresh coffee, porcelain cups, and warm tea for the remaining guests. Her perfectly pressed black uniform and neatly tied apron reflected the same professionalism she had demonstrated throughout the evening. She moved carefully around the table, refilling each cup without interrupting the discussion. Her attention remained focused on every guest, while her mind quietly followed every sentence spoken by the executives. The strategy itself impressed her. The discipline behind it deserved respect. Yet one assumption remained untouched, resting quietly beneath the entire presentation like an unseen foundation no one had paused to examine. As she placed a fresh cup before one of the senior directors, Ethan continued speaking. "The strongest leaders encourage difficult questions because strong ideas become stronger when challenged." Several executives smiled in agreement. One vice president added, "That philosophy has guided every successful expansion we have completed." Ethan nodded confidently. "Exactly. If a strategy cannot survive honest scrutiny, it does not deserve implementation." Olivia finished serving the final guest and prepared to step away. Then Ethan glanced briefly toward her before returning his attention to the table. With a faint smile that carried more certainty than kindness, he remarked, "Fortunately, discussions like these require experience that most people will never understand." A few executives laughed politely. Others remained silent. Olivia paused for only a moment. She neither appeared offended nor embarrassed. Instead, she looked toward Ethan with the same calm expression she had maintained since the beginning of the evening. "Excuse me, sir," she said respectfully. "May I ask one question?" The dining table became unexpectedly quiet. Ethan looked up with mild surprise. His first instinct was to decline, yet something about her composed manner made him curious. "One question," he replied. Olivia nodded gratefully. "Thank you." She held the coffee pot comfortably at her side before speaking with quiet confidence. "You explained that every successful strategy should survive honest questions before implementation. If your expansion model depends upon customer trust growing at the same pace as operational growth, what contingency protects the company if trust develops more slowly than infrastructure, even when every financial projection remains accurate?" The question was neither confrontational nor emotional. It was calm, precise, and entirely professional. The words settled across the table with remarkable weight. Ethan's confident expression remained unchanged for an instant before he looked back toward the charts displayed across his tablet. One executive quietly lowered his pen. Another slowly exchanged a thoughtful glance with the colleague beside him. The vice president who had praised the presentation only moments earlier leaned back without speaking. Olivia waited patiently. She showed no satisfaction, no desire to expose anyone's weakness, only genuine curiosity. Ethan studied the financial model once again, reviewing assumptions he had explained confidently throughout the evening. For the first time since the meeting began, he did not answer immediately. The elegant dining room continued humming softly with distant conversations and quiet piano music, but around that single table an unmistakable silence settled into the space where certainty had existed only seconds before. Every Executive realized the same thing at almost the same moment. The quiet waitress had not challenged Ethan's intelligence. She had challenged his reasoning, and no one in the room yet possessed an answer. No one at the table spoke. The silence that followed Olivia Brooks's question felt heavier than every presentation, projection, and confident conclusion that had filled the evening until that moment. The soft piano continued somewhere across the restaurant, and crystal chandeliers still reflected warm light across polished marble floors. Yet the executives seated around Ethan Miller suddenly found themselves studying the same charts with completely different eyes. Ethan remained focused on the financial model displayed on his tablet. His fingers slowly moved across several pages as he reviewed assumptions he had explained with complete confidence only minutes earlier. He searched for an immediate answer, the kind that had earned him respect throughout decades of executive leadership. None arrived. The contingency Olivia had described did not appear anywhere in the documents. Every projection assumed that operational expansion and customer trust would grow together. No independent safeguard existed if public confidence developed more slowly than infrastructure. One senior executive quietly adjusted his glasses before speaking. "That variable was discussed briefly several months ago," he said thoughtfully. "We concluded the probability was extremely low." Another director slowly shook his head. "Low probability does not mean zero probability." A third executive leaned closer to the table. "If customer confidence lags behind operational investment, fixed costs continue rising while revenue growth slows. The financial exposure becomes much greater than our current model suggests." Ethan listened without interrupting. Instead of defending his presentation, he continued reviewing every assumption line by line. Olivia remained standing beside the table with the polished coffee pot resting comfortably in one hand. Her expression showed neither satisfaction nor impatience. She had not asked the question to prove anyone wrong. She had asked it because she genuinely believed strong ideas deserved honest examination. Several nearby guests quietly noticed the unusual stillness surrounding the executive table. They could not hear every word, but they recognized the unmistakable atmosphere of thoughtful reflection replacing confident discussion. After another long moment, Ethan finally looked up. His voice remained calm, though noticeably quieter than before. "That is an important question," he admitted. "I do not have a complete answer tonight." The admission surprised several executives far more than Olivia's question itself. Throughout his career, Ethan had built a reputation for certainty under pressure. Hearing him openly acknowledge uncertainty demonstrated a level of honesty few people expected from someone in his position. Olivia offered a respectful nod. "Thank you, sir." Ethan studied her for a moment before asking, "May I ask you something?" "Of course," Olivia replied warmly. "What made you notice that particular assumption?" Olivia answered without hesitation. "Because every strategy eventually depends upon people, and people do not always move at the same speed as financial forecasts. Buildings, technology, and logistics can expand according to schedule. Trust follows its own timeline." The executives exchanged thoughtful glances. One vice president quietly wrote the sentence into his notebook. Another slowly smiled as though recognizing a perspective the meeting had been missing from the beginning. Ethan looked once more at the projection displayed across his tablet before closing it gently. "That observation changes the way I need to evaluate this entire proposal," he said honestly. Olivia smiled with quiet humility. "Perhaps it simply gives the proposal one more opportunity to become stronger." Her answer carried no trace of superiority. She had offered insight rather than victory. Ethan slowly stood from his chair, not because the meeting had ended, but because he understood that the evening had become something far more valuable than another business discussion. Around the elegant dining room, conversations gradually resumed, yet everyone seated at the executive table remained quietly aware that the most significant contribution to their strategic planning had not come from an expensive consultant, a senior director, or a celebrated chief executive. It had come from a calm waitress who understood that the most powerful questions are rarely asked to embarrass someone. They are asked to help everyone discover a better answer. The atmosphere surrounding Ethan Miller's table had changed completely. Only minutes earlier, the executives had spoken with complete confidence, exchanging polished presentations and carefully prepared conclusions. Now every document remained open, Yet no one rushed to defend what had previously seemed unquestionable. Warm light from the crystal chandeliers continued reflecting across polished marble floors, while the gentle piano melody filled the elegant restaurant. But inside that small circle of business leaders, something far more important than another corporate strategy was taking place. They were learning the rare discipline of reconsidering certainty. Ethan slowly looked toward Olivia Brooks once again. The black waitress still stood beside the table wearing her neatly pressed black uniform and carefully tied apron, holding the polished silver coffee pot with the same calm professionalism she had displayed throughout the evening. There was no triumph in her expression, no satisfaction at having surprised an accomplished executive. She appeared exactly as she had before asking her question, respectful, composed, and quietly attentive. Ethan spoke with genuine curiosity. You have clearly spent time thinking about strategic planning. That was not an ordinary observation. Olivia smiled gently before answering. I enjoy learning, sir. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Many people enjoy learning. Very few ask questions like that. Olivia paused for a moment before replying. Questions become stronger when they come from listening carefully instead of trying to impress someone. Several executives exchanged thoughtful glances. One senior director quietly closed his notebook before asking, Did you study business? Olivia answered honestly, Yes. I completed business administration courses several years ago. Since then I have continued reading because I believe education should never stop after graduation. Another executive looked genuinely surprised. Then why are you working here? The question carried sincere curiosity rather than judgment. Olivia answered with complete comfort. Because life does not always move in straight lines. Family responsibilities became my first priority for a while, and this position allowed me to support the people who needed me most. During that time, I never stopped learning. Books remained available. Libraries remained open. Ideas never required a corner office. The table became quiet once again. Her explanation contained no complaint and no attempt to gain sympathy. She simply described reality with the same calm honesty that had guided every conversation throughout the evening. Ethan folded his hands together as he reflected upon everything that had happened since dinner began. Earlier that night, he had believed one brief interaction revealed enough information to judge another person's intelligence. Now he realized that his own conclusion had revealed far more about his assumptions than about Olivia herself. One executive quietly smiled before saying, Perhaps we spend too much time measuring resumes and too little time recognizing character. Another nodded in agreement. And curiosity. Ethan looked directly at Olivia. You asked one question that improved an entire strategic discussion. None of us should ignore that. Olivia answered softly. The question already existed, sir. I simply happened to notice it. Those simple words settled deeply into everyone's thoughts. She claimed neither credit nor recognition. She merely reminded them that wisdom often begins with careful observation rather than loud confidence. Around the restaurant, guests continued enjoying their meals, unaware that one of the evening's most valuable leadership lessons had unfolded beside an ordinary dinner table. Ethan slowly stood, no longer carrying the certainty that had accompanied him into the restaurant hours earlier. Instead, he carried something far more valuable. Respect for a woman he had misunderstood, appreciation for the power of genuine curiosity, and the growing realization that the greatest leaders are not those who always have the quickest answers, but those humble enough to recognize an important question regardless of who asks it. For several quiet moments, no one reached for another document or reopened the presentation. The discussion had moved beyond charts and projections into something far more meaningful. Ethan Miller remained standing beside the table, looking at Olivia Brooks with a level of attention completely different from the confidence he had displayed earlier that evening. The elegant restaurant continued its gentle rhythm beneath warm crystal chandeliers, while the soft piano melody floated through the dining room. Yet the executives surrounding him understood they had witnessed a rare moment that could not be measured on any financial report. Ethan spoke first. Olivia, I owe you an apology. His voice was steady, sincere, and free from the pride that had once shaped every sentence. Earlier this evening, I judged your intelligence because of your position and because of one insignificant mistake. I believed I understood who you were after only a few seconds. I was wrong. Olivia listened quietly without interrupting. Her expression remained kind and composed, showing neither satisfaction nor resentment. Ethan continued, "Calling someone dumb says nothing about their ability. It reveals the limits of the person making the judgment. I allowed my assumptions to speak before my character did." The executives sitting around the table exchanged thoughtful glances. Several slowly nodded, recognizing the honesty behind his words. Olivia answered with the same calm voice that had guided every conversation throughout the evening. "Thank you for saying that, sir. It takes courage to reconsider a conclusion in front of other people." Ethan smiled faintly. "Tonight you reminded me that leadership begins with humility, not certainty." One senior executive quietly added, "Perhaps that is the lesson every organization eventually has to learn." Another director leaned forward with genuine curiosity. "Olivia, when you asked your question, were you trying to prove our strategy was wrong?" She gently shook her head. "No, I believed your strategy had great potential. I simply noticed one assumption that deserved another conversation. Good ideas should become stronger after honest questions, not weaker." The simplicity of her answer settled naturally around the table. Nobody felt challenged. Nobody felt embarrassed. Instead, every executive recognized that she had contributed exactly what Ethan himself had encouraged throughout the meeting: thoughtful examination before important decisions. Ethan slowly returned to his chair, but this time he closed the presentation on his tablet instead of reopening it. "We will revise the proposal before presenting it to the board," he said confidently. Customer trust deserves its own independent analysis. Olivia's observation made that clear. Every executive agreed without hesitation. One vice president quietly remarked, "This single conversation may have prevented an expensive mistake." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "And it happened because someone outside our boardroom was willing to think instead of remaining silent." Olivia smiled warmly. Sometimes a different perspective simply comes from standing in a different place. Those words lingered in the air long after she spoke them. Ethan realized that everyone inside the company had approached the project from nearly identical backgrounds, similar careers, and comparable experiences. Olivia had viewed the same challenge through an entirely different lens, and that difference had revealed something they had all overlooked. Before Olivia returned to her duties, Ethan looked at her once more. "Thank you for treating us with respect, even after I failed to offer you the same courtesy." Olivia answered softly, "Respect is easiest to give when it does not depend on receiving it first." The sentence settled across the table with quiet power. No one immediately responded because there was nothing left to improve. It was not merely a thoughtful observation. It was a principle capable of shaping both leadership and life. As Olivia calmly walked toward another table to greet newly arriving guests with the same warm smile she had offered everyone that evening, every executive watched her with genuine admiration. The woman they had barely noticed when dinner began had become the person whose wisdom would influence every important decision they made after leaving the restaurant. The atmosphere inside the restaurant felt noticeably different from the one that had existed only an hour earlier. Conversations continued beneath the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. The grand piano still filled the elegant dining room with gentle melodies, and servers quietly moved between beautifully arranged tables. Yet something invisible had shifted. Respect now carried more weight than status. Curiosity had replaced certainty. Ethan Miller looked around the table at the executives who had accompanied him throughout the evening. Instead of discussing quarterly projections, they found themselves exchanging ideas with a level of openness that had been missing before Olivia Brooks asked her single thoughtful question. Ethan closed the final presentation on his tablet and folded his hands together. "Beginning tomorrow," he said calmly, "every strategic review meeting will include one requirement. Before approving any proposal, we will ask what assumption we may have overlooked." Several executives immediately agreed. One senior director smiled thoughtfully. "That may become the most valuable policy we have ever adopted." Another executive added, "Tonight reminded us that confidence should never replace curiosity." Ethan nodded. "Exactly. We should never confuse experience with complete understanding." While the discussion continued, Olivia quietly returned to her responsibilities. Wearing her neatly pressed black uniform and carefully tied apron, she welcomed a couple celebrating their anniversary, helped another guest choose a dessert, and thanked each visitor with the same warmth she had shown since the beginning of her shift. Nothing about her manner suggested that she had just influenced an important corporate discussion involving some of the world's most accomplished business leaders. She neither sought recognition nor expected praise. To Olivia, treating people with dignity had never depended upon whether anyone noticed. The restaurant manager approached her near the service station with a proud smile. "You handled yourself beautifully tonight," he said quietly. Olivia smiled with gentle gratitude. "Thank you. I only tried to be respectful." The manager nodded. "You accomplished much more than that." Before she could respond, another server approached carrying a tray of dessert plates. "Everyone keeps talking about what happened at the executive table," he whispered. Olivia softly laughed. "Tomorrow they will probably be talking about something completely different." "Does that bother you?" the younger server asked. Olivia gently shook her head. "Not at all. Lessons matter more than attention." Across the dining room, Ethan happened to notice the brief conversation. He watched as Olivia helped her coworkers organize the service station, answered a new employee's question with patience, and quietly thanked the kitchen staff for preparing another successful evening of service. Every action reflected the same character she had displayed throughout the night. She did not become gracious after receiving respect. She had been gracious long before anyone recognized her wisdom. Ethan slowly stood and walked toward the restaurant manager. "Your team has someone extraordinary," he said sincerely. The manager smiled. "We have always believed that." Tonight, everyone else finally noticed. Ethan looked once more toward Olivia. She reminded an entire room of executives that intelligence speaks most clearly through humility. The manager answered warmly. "She reminds us of that almost every day." Ethan quietly reflected upon those words. He realized that greatness often remains invisible to people who only look for impressive titles or expensive offices. Sometimes extraordinary character wears a simple apron, serves coffee with a genuine smile, and asks one thoughtful question capable of changing the direction of an important conversation. As the evening slowly approached its conclusion, the elegant restaurant returned to its familiar rhythm, but everyone who had witnessed the exchange understood that they would remember this night for reasons far greater than business. They would remember the quiet waitress whose wisdom transformed an ordinary dinner into a lesson about leadership, humility, and the remarkable power of listening before judging. The evening gradually settled into a peaceful rhythm as the last dinner reservations drew to a close. Crystal chandeliers continued casting warm reflections across polished marble floors, while the lights of Manhattan shimmered beyond the towering windows. Guests quietly finished their desserts. Conversations softened into gentle laughter, and the grand piano played its final melodies before the musician offered a grateful smile to the remaining diners. Olivia Brooks continued her work exactly as she had begun it hours earlier. Wearing her perfectly pressed black uniform and neatly tied apron, she collected empty coffee cups, thanked every guest sincerely, and wished each family a safe journey home. Nothing about her demeanor suggested she had become the center of one of the evening's most unforgettable moments. She neither expected recognition nor sought attention. To her, professionalism was not something reserved for special occasions. It was simply a habit of respecting every person she met. Ethan Miller remained seated for several quiet moments after the other executives finished gathering their briefing folders. Earlier that evening, he had entered the restaurant believing leadership meant recognizing talent instantly and judging people accurately through brief observations. Now he understood that genuine leadership demanded something much more difficult. It required the humility to admit when those observations were incomplete. He slowly stood and walked toward Olivia as she carefully folded fresh linen napkins near the service station. She noticed him approaching and greeted him with the same warm smile she had offered every guest throughout the evening. "I hope you enjoyed your dinner, sir." Ethan smiled gently. "I received something much more valuable than dinner." Olivia waited politely as he continued. "When I arrived tonight, I believed intelligence announced itself through titles, achievements, and impressive conversations. You reminded me that wisdom often arrives quietly, wearing an apron instead of an executive suit." Olivia lowered her eyes modestly before answering. "Every person has something worth learning if we are willing to listen." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "I will remember that for a very long time." One of the senior executives joined them carrying his portfolio beneath one arm. "Our board meeting next month will be very different because of one thoughtful question," he said sincerely. You improved our work without ever trying to prove anyone wrong. Olivia smiled gently. Sometimes improving an idea is more important than proving a point. The executive laughed softly. That may become my favorite leadership principle. The restaurant manager quietly approached with visible pride. Olivia has always believed that the best conversations begin with respect, he said. Ethan looked toward the manager before replying. Then your restaurant teaches much more than hospitality. As the executives prepared to leave, Ethan extended his hand once more. Olivia accepted it warmly. Thank you for your patience, he said. And thank you for reminding me that assumptions should always be questioned before people are. Olivia answered with quiet sincerity. The strongest questions are the ones that help everyone grow. Ethan smiled, including the person asking them. Outside, the cool Manhattan evening welcomed the departing executives as city lights reflected across the streets below. Ethan paused for one final glance through the restaurant windows. Inside, Olivia was already helping another coworker organize the service station, offering encouragement with the same kindness she had shown every guest that evening. She had not changed because others finally recognized her intelligence. She had simply remained herself from beginning to end. Ethan realized that was precisely what made her extraordinary. Wealth could purchase influence. Titles could command authority. Experience could earn admiration. Yet none of those achievements mattered without the humility to respect another human being before knowing their story. Long after the restaurant closed and the lights inside grew dim, the lesson from that evening remained unforgettable. The woman who had been dismissed with a single careless word never needed to raise her voice, embarrass anyone, or demand recognition. One thoughtful question accomplished what pride never could. It replaced assumption with understanding, certainty with curiosity, and judgment with respect. In the end, the wisest person in the room was not the one who spoke the most. It was the one who listened carefully, asked with kindness, and quietly reminded everyone that true intelligence never needs to announce itself, because genuine character always speaks first.